Despite historic levels of opposition today, Betsy DeVos, against all odds and aided by hundreds of millions of dollars in donations to the Republican Party over the past few decades, was confirmed as our next and possibly last Secretary of Education. She will be heading up the public schools of our nation, despite having no experience going to, teaching in, or possibly even stepping foot inside of a public school. And the opposition was strong, though, and so that's where we're going to begin. Vice President Mike Pence was actually forced to cast a historically unprecedented tie-breaking vote to move her confirmation forward, the first time in the nation's history that a vice president has had to do that. And in fact, we have some video of that tie-breaking vote, which we're going to watch now.
On this vote, the yeas are 50, the nays are 50. The Senate being equally divided, the vice president votes in the affirmative, and the nomination is confirmed.
Now, there was a lot of resistance to Betsy DeVos. It unfortunately did not succeed, but we do still want to recognize it. We're going to start with a controversial part of that opposition, though, because two Republicans, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, ended up withholding support for DeVos's confirmation after outreach from constituents. They voted against her, joining 48 Democrats and producing that 50-50 tie. However, there is some controversy about how strong their opposition to her actually was, considering that they theoretically could have actually stopped her during the party line 12-11 committee vote that happened, I believe, last week.
Yeah.
And so that is a fair criticism.
It's a fair criticism. Yes.
There's a timeline issue.
There's a timeline issue. Everything that you criticize about the Senate is fair because there's so many arcane rules in how the Senate is run. There's so much, everything down to the distinguished gentleman from Connecticut, when you, well, not distinguished, but John, but the way they speak to each other, all these arcane rules are to create an atmosphere of comity, C-O-M-I-T-Y, careful, although it often results in the other spelling. The notion that, yes, they could have voted in committee, but sometimes you could be Lisa Murkowski or Susan Collins, and you could say, hey, I don't want this woman to be Secretary of Education, and this is in deference to the Senate, but I want to send her nomination. I want to let the Senate decide on this. Because, truthfully, should they lose in committee, there are other arcane rules that would allow her nomination to have been pushed to the floor anyway.
Still
could have gone to the floor. In 1983, Reagan had a guy who was there for, who was up for, he was up for a smaller post. I think it was the arms control and, some arms control agency at that time. And he didn't make it out of committee, but they pushed him to the floor.
Yeah.
And so that happens. So you could make a stand, but the stand wouldn't be any different. I think this speaks to the fact, though, that, yes, they got a ton of calls from constituents. All these senators apparently did. It resonated with Murkowski and Collins. A lot of people are saying, hey, but these people the teachers' unions are so strong in places like Alaska and Maine. Teachers' unions are strong in lots of places. And, yes, if they are, and they did move their vote for that reason, they still moved their vote, and they didn't have to. These are not senators who are going to lose because of this vote in their states. Maybe actually I should take that back in the case of Murkowski, who was won in tentative races. But I don't think that was the case here. I think it sort of happened the way it happened, and they were always on the fence.
Yeah, exactly. And look, there's probably going to be, with a guy who holds grudges the way Donald Trump does, a little bit of strike back against them as a result of this. I mean, they didn't get that third vote to actually stop Betsy DeVos, yet they still voted against her. They went on the record against her. And it could have still gotten to the Senate anyway, but theoretically, if your opposition is that she could potentially destroy the system of public education and your constituents are reaching out to you, maybe voting against her in the committee is a good idea regardless. But then it could be that those calls came in like half before, half after the vote. It's complicated. They deserve perhaps some credit, although they could have done more.
I think anybody could do more, right?
Yes.
They could have convinced more of their colleagues. I think that's the shame of this, is that they weren't able. I don't care about the committee vote because, like we said, it's important. It's really important. But she could still be the Secretary of Education without the committee vote.
True, yeah.
But that they didn't get some of their colleagues. Joe Manchin, Democrat from West Virginia, was pleading apparently with Dean Heller of Nevada to please switch his vote and please vote against DeVos, and it didn't happen, obviously. But so that's where maybe the lobbying they could have done more. But I think, listen, it takes guts even though it doesn't seem like that from where we're sitting and on this nominee, to vote against your party on the floor of the Senate. It's why it seldom happens. So, it takes political guts, let's just put it that way.
Now, I want to give credit to some of the other people who did work to try to stop her from getting that position. Democrats, as we reported yesterday, opposed her nomination by holding the Senate floor for 24 hours in an effort to persuade more Republicans to oppose her. They spoke throughout the night, were unfortunately unsuccessful in convincing even one other Republican to go against someone who is clearly philosophically opposed to the point of the department and also fundamentally unqualified to lead it. Senators and teachers unions were even more outspoken in their opposition to DeVos after her confirmation hearing, during which, and this is just a reminder if you don't know why we're opposed to her, if you're coming into this late, she claimed to be confused about a federal law protecting students with disabilities, refused to say she wouldn't privatize the education system wholesale, and said guns in schools were sometimes necessary to protect students from grizzly bears. And that does sound like Kate McKinnon playing Betsy DeVos, but that was actually what she really said. And she was just not a popular pick. The people who supported her were a little bit more quiet about it. In the last few days before her Senate vote, someone paid sites such as swagbucks.com and instagc.com to pay people to go to supportdevos.com and support her nomination. So there was a bit of sock puppetry going on for the support of a cabinet position nominee, which I don't think I've ever seen before. But one other thing that could have influenced some of those who voted to support her, despite the fact that she has no experience relevant to this position.
None.
No experience.
None.
She's never taught. She didn't go. I mean, in the past, like under Obama, it's a guy who went to public schools, taught in public schools. Right. That's important because it's public schools. But let's talk about the money. Sitting Republican senators have received $115,000 from Betsy DeVos herself and more than $950,000 from her family since 1980. In the past 2 election cycles alone, her family has donated $8.3 million to Republican Party super PACs. And if you can put up this list, you're going to see individual Republican senators in the amount that they got. At least Marco Rubio had a higher price. I guess Inhofe didn't require much money to support her. But
but Rubio also ran for president. Everybody else there ran for Senate. So
that's a good point. He probably cleared more money as a result of that.
Exactly. And you see, though, Lisa Murkowski there got $43,200 from her and voted against her.
And still voted against her. That's true.
So when I talk to you about what, it takes balls to do that, it's, to you and me sitting here doesn't seem so ballsy, but those are political moves that are, that can threaten them. Nobody has ever been less qualified either. Mm-hmm. And this stuff here should show you the control that money has on these people, if you didn't know it already. And there has to be a law. This should be the catalyst to a law that changes whether or not a senator can vote on the nomination of someone who has given them even $1.
I mean, if you explain that to people, like a Jimmy Kimmel style on the street or Jay Leno style, could you get one person out of 100 to say that you should be allowed to vote if somebody gets a job after you've given them $65,000?
Right. Exactly.
Nobody would think you could do that. We talked yesterday about the protests in Romania. There's a politician who is trying to change the law to allow himself to head up a political party. Right now, he can't because of a $26,000 corruption crime that he committed. $26,000. Marco Rubio was paid more than 3 times that just by this one individual,
right.
And they can vote. It's crazy that they can do that.
It makes no sense, and this should definitely change that law. And I mean, the other side of it is, it's not going to make a difference. Bring those numbers up. Let's just pick anyone. Tim Scott, South Carolina, 49,200. Tim Scott was going to win his race. He will be reelected to the Senate as he just was if he votes against Betsy DeVos, if he doesn't get her money next time. That's what the calculations that go into this are so, that's what they would argue is the reason that, it doesn't matter because I'd be fine with it. But the fact that she did give you the money taints the whole pool.
Exactly.
You should not be able to vote on it.
Yeah, and look, we've got reason to believe that some Republicans could be beginning to turn against Trump, or at least it seemed like that. But I mean, this is a layup. This is, if there's anything that you can vote against, it's this. I mean, look, Ben Carson, he's not qualified to head HUD, certainly. But you could make the case that he's higher profile. He has a demonstrated history of intelligence in a limited field, at least.
Yeah.
I mean, she has none of that, and she's tainted by all this money. You'll never get an easier no vote, and the vast, vast majority of Republican senators show that they are not up to the task.
And a lot of these Republicans like the fact that she's ill-prepared for this job because
that's true.
They don't like this department. Yeah. So if she runs it into the ground, so be it. They don't really care. I would imagine some of them feel that way about HUD as well. And some of these cabinet positions, they don't spend a tremendous amount of time thinking about. But somebody like Scott Pruitt, who's up next, who's super qualified for his job in a frightening way, right? As we
qualified.
Well,
he has experience in that field, yes.
He has experience in that field, but what I mean is that he has a mind that is put toward that field. I don't want him near that department, right? So Betsy DeVos doesn't have any of that. Ben Carson has none of that. Scott Pruitt might be the scariest of the three of them, actually, right?
Of the three of them.
What wouldn't you say?
Yeah, if we were to expand it to like Sessions and stuff like that, I might throw him in there. Or Tillerson,
possibly.
But of the three, yes.
Yes. I think Sessions is number one on the list, more than Tillerson, more than him. But let's just go with this. That's something where Democrats should really put their time in because he has the capability of doing tremendous damage there.
To the whole entire planet.
Exactly. And these other people, I think the Republicans would vote against because they are, against some Republicans because they're just against the departments. And
one last thing in this. We've given a lot of reasons why we don't think that she should head up the Department of Education. And many conservatives might say, I don't like public education. I don't like it. I like the idea of charter schools, or I want money to go to establishing Christian schools or something like that. But there were a lot of, like Lisa Murkowski, I believe, said this, and some of the Democrats who are in areas that are a little bit more red said all of this money that's going to be taken away from public education and thrown into giving you choices of private schools to go to, which might sound good to some people. If you live in a rural area, in some of the most red areas of America, there are no private schools. The concept of choice means nothing if you can't actually go to one because none exist. But the money will still be taken away from the public schools that your kids rely on. There are so many Trump voters whose kids are now going to be screwed over, and they will have no recourse because there are none of these fancy charter schools in their little farming town. But they don't know it yet. They're going to find out in a couple of years the damage that's going to be done to their kids' futures.
If the demographics of Trump voters are accurate, if the ones that we learned about after the election, if they're accurate, historically, there's no precedent for this number of people voting against their self-interest as they have with Donald Trump. They were just bamboozled. And DeVos is one of those, the proof of one of those reasons. The Affordable Care Act, another one. I mean, it's going to go on and on, especially in places. Those things help people where Trump voters live. And it's amazing.
Get the full 2-hour show ad-free. Become a member, tytnetwork.com/join.